the sort of priority, first of all, today is there's been some very sad news coming out of the rugby world. The day after that famous Scotland win in Cardiff, it was announced that fly half Barry John had very sadly passed away at the age of 79 at the University Hospital of Wales. Jiffy, there aren't many people who are better placed to speak about Barry. You watched him growing up. You went to the same school as him as well, so I'll just hand over to you.
Yeah, it was odd, when you walk into the gates of Gwenroth Grammar School, there's and you see there's Carwyn James, Barry John, and Gareth Davies. My predecessors, all on the wall. So there's no pressure on a young kid, going into that school. The fortunate thing about growing up in Wales, Barry, although he moved to Cardiff, he only lived. I went to live in the same village as him, Kevin, I did. So he's only 10 miles away from Tramsaran. Phil Bennett is only 5 miles away from Tramsaran. So, you grow up watching these, whether it's on television or live. And it's just they're an inspiration because if they can do it from their backgrounds, why can't we do it? So, and then when you meet them, they're just great blokes. They're genuinely real nice people, rugby people with time for everyone. And it's been difficult, the last few years with Eddie Butler going and Benny going, Jerry, JPR going, Di Watkins going. It's and now Barry. So it's those are the big names that have gone. Ben Price. So it's a generation of superstars, that have passed away. So it's been very, very sad. And I've done too many of these interviews now, to be honest.
I think I suppose that's testament, all these names that you're mentioning, that many of them we've discussed in the podcast following their passing.
Yeah.
Testament to the golden generation of Wales that it was as well, because you mentioned as soon as Barry John retired, and he only retired at 27, Phil Bennett was there. So it really was a golden generation of Welsh rugby.
Yeah. Very lucky.
No, very, very lucky. Chris, when I was sort of obviously when I saw the news, I obviously, did some extra reading around Barry John as well. And something that a lot of people are surprised by, obviously his reputation precedes him. A 6-year career is not long. He was in the George Best ilk in terms of the fame, not necessarily sitting right with him, which for many led to an early retirement at 27. But the fact that he left such a legacy in a 6-year career, is it the most efficient legacy a player's ever left?
Well, of course, there was a lot less Test rugby in those days. And crikey, when he retired, I would only have been sort of 12 or 13 myself. But I was brought up in a rugby area, didn't throw up quite as many superstars as Jonathan's area. It threw up Chilcot, which is a different kettle of fish, really. But Jerry Guscott and those people. But growing up, and getting into rugby really, and sort of moving out of that sort of early childhood football obsession and finding other sports that maybe had a bigger effect on me. Barry was a giant of a name, and what quickly became clear, even to the uneducated eye, which many would argue I still have, but there was, he was clearly a master of what he did. There was great mastery. But there was a mystery about him. That was the thing. He did what appeared to be quite simple things, and you couldn't quite work out how he'd done them. And I think back to Jonathan's commentary on the game at the weekend. And very often, Jonathan, in fact, you often talk about the simple things. Do the simple things. This is obvious. Do this, do this, do this. And Barry John understood the simple thing. And to understand the simple thing as well as Barry did, and maybe as well as Jonathan did, and Benny and the other really great Welsh fly halves, that's quite a difficult thing. It's difficult to be that easy. But once you've mastered it, you've mastered the game. And Barry mastered the game. There are a hell of a lot of clips on YouTube of him creating stuff for other people. Not so many of him scoring himself, although he scored some beauties. But crikey, he didn't have to create for other people. And of course, he had the wonderful kicking game as well. Whoever it was said he had the knack of appearing in a room without using the door. had it about right. There was something slightly mystical, not in a religious sense, but something that was something indefinable about what he was able to do, and that's to be treasured, because that doesn't come along very often.
I think it's very, Ollie, it's when you say it, he's a type of guy where he ghosted on the field, and he had graceful and style. And when he had Di Watkins or Phil Bennett, they were jinky times, a guy, explosive player. Gareth was slightly different. He just ghosted and swerved and ball in two hands, and he just made. It's like any other sportsman. If you've got time on the ball in whatever sport you play, then you're a special player. And then Barry certainly was that. I was very lucky. I met him for a couple of beers with his two brothers, two very good rugby players as well, and just to sit there and listen to them talk was an education in itself.